Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a time when speaking too freely could cost you everything. You live in a small stone house with creaky wooden shutters tucked into a narrow street where footsteps echo just a little too loudly. There's a breeze tonight, just enough to stir the dust and rattle the fig leaves. The bells from the nearby church have long since gone silent, but your ears still ring a little. Whether from memory or imagination, it's hard to say. You're standing by the courtyard, well filling your water jug, as you always do. But something's different. The woman who usually nods politely as she passes doesn't even look your way tonight. The baker's son, always humming some crude tune, now whistles nothing at all. There's a hush, heavy and moist, like rain waiting to fall. You hear a whisper, a name. Not yours, at least not yet, but it's familiar. Old Mateo from 2 doors down. They say he's gone away. No one says where. You hold the water jug tighter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You head back inside. The jug is heavier than usual, or maybe your arms are just more aware. The door creaks when you close it, no matter how softly you try. Inside, your home feels smaller. Not because it is, but because you've just learned how many walls in this city have ears. You think about Mateo. He wasn't unfaithful. He didn't curse the saints or draw forbidden signs. He sold olive oil and told long stories about donkeys. Maybe he talked too much. Or maybe he talked to the wrong person. You sit at your small table and stare at your bowl of lentils. The spoon is crooked. Your hand trembles slightly, so you hold it with the other. You tell yourself that this will pass, but tomorrow at the well, someone else might be missing. It wasn't always like this. Once you sang at night. There were festivals and market music and old widows shouting across balconies. But lately, even the pigeons seem to coo more quietly. The whole city is curling inward like a snail, touched by the Inquisition's slow-moving shadow. You light a candle, not because you need more light, because you need the sound of the match striking. You need proof that your fingers still work, that flame still obeys you. Then the knock comes. It's not loud, just deliberate. 3 times. You don't move. Maybe it was the wind. Then again, 3 more. You open the door. Just a crack. It's only your neighbor Leona. But her eyes look too round, like she's seen something sharp. She leans in. Have you heard? You nod. Mateo. She glances left, then right, then lowers her voice. They came for him after Vespers. No shouting, just a man in black robes and 2 guards. They walked him out like he was going to dinner. You swallow. She says, no trial, no explanation. You ask, do you think? She cuts you off. I think it's best we don't talk about it. And then she leaves. You close the door, double latch it, and sit back down with your spoon and your lentils. But now the taste is gone. You chew mechanically, as though eating is a task, not a comfort. You look around your tiny room. Every book, every carving, every word written in your letters, suddenly it all feels suspect. Did you write something foolish? Did you once say something in jest about a saint's ugly sandals? Did you forget to cross yourself during a storm? Historians still argue whether the Inquisition's power was in its justice or its fear, whether it truly had eyes in every wall, or if it simply convinced everyone that it did. Either way, tonight you believe it. You stand again, pull the cloth over your small altar. You don't stop praying, but now you do it in silence, just in case someone's listening. The notary doesn't arrive in the dead of night like a villain from a play. That would almost be a kindness, at least. Then you'd know what to expect. No, he comes at mid-morning in broad daylight with the sun slanting politely through the windows and birds chirping as if nothing in the world were wrong. He's not even dressed dramatically. No black cloak, no dangling cross, just a tidy, forgettable robe and a leather pouch too small for anything useful unless you count a list of names. He knocks once, not 3 times like a threat, just once. Confident, measured, as if he already knows you'll open the door. You do. You regret it instantly, but you do. He smiles, not warmly, not coldly, just enough to be confusing. He asks for your name. You say it. He asks if you have a moment. You lie. Of course. He steps inside like he belongs there. His shoes are dustless, and you notice that his hands are stained with ink around the cuticles, as though he scrubs them often, but never enough. One ring glints a simple gold band, no insignia. Not married. Just official. He removes a small wooden stool from your wall and sits without being offered. I've been assigned your district, he says, to ensure the record is maintained. The way he says it, the record, like it's the only one that matters, makes your stomach shrink. He opens his pouch. Inside is not parchment or a scroll, but a small book, bound tightly, its cover cracked and soft with use. There's no title, no flourish, just a tool, like a blade. He flips a few pages. You notice tiny notches in the margins, color codes, maybe initials. He doesn't ask questions like a friend. He asks them like a tailor, measuring for a coffin suit. How long have you lived here? Who taught you your prayers? Do you speak any tongues besides Castilian? Have you ever been to a wedding where a song was sung in Hebrew? Your throat is dry, but your answers come. Not because you've rehearsed them, because you haven't had the time to panic. You want to say, I've done nothing wrong. But you don't, because you've seen what happens to people who declare their innocence too quickly. It's like drawing a sword in a crowded square. People assume you came for a fight. Instead, you say, I don't remember the names of the songs. He writes something down. You wonder if that was the wrong thing to say. The notary nods, folds the book shut, and stands. He doesn't thank you. just adjusts his pouch and straightens his robe. Then he says, "If we require further detail, we'll return." You nod, and your lips murmur something like, "Of course," but it feels like a borrowed phrase from someone more composed than you. He opens your door, stops. "Oh," he says as if remembering. "Do you know a woman named Leona?" Your blood doesn't freeze, it curdles. You swallow. "She lives next door." He waits, quill in hand. You add, "She buys figs from the vendor on Calle Baja." He scratches something down. Then he's gone. The door closes. The latch falls. And the silence comes roaring in like a wave. You sit where he sat because you're too tired to move. You stare at your hands. They look smaller now, older, like they belong to someone who's been slowly disappearing. Later, you will reheat your coffee. You will let it boil over, just slightly so the smell cuts through the air like a cleansing charm. You'll sit near your window, but not too close. You'll read a book of Psalms, but only the Latin verses. And you'll wonder, how many answers did he already know? How many did he only ask to see how you would lie? Historians still argue whether the notaries were mere bureaucrats or silent executioners in robes. You decide it doesn't matter, because both get paid either way. You're sweeping the threshold of your home the next day when it happens, your name whispered, not shouted. A slip of sound that flutters like a torn leaf and vanishes as soon as it lands. You don't hear the full sentence, just him, and then your name, and then silence, fast and sharp, like a closing door. You freeze, broom in hand, dust mid-air. You glance up casually, or as casually as one can when your spine has turned to glass, and scan the street. A man passes tugging a stubborn mule. A child skips. A woman adjusts her shawl and moves along the far wall. No one looks at you, which is exactly the problem, because yesterday they would have. You lean the broom against the wall and retreat indoors. Your heartbeat is suddenly theatrical, like a drummer who doesn't know when to stop. Back inside, everything feels different. The walls seem too thin, the windows too open, and your floor creaks with a kind of disloyalty. The morning light, usually welcome, now feels like it's pointing fingers. You try to rationalize it. Maybe they were talking about another man with your name. Maybe it wasn't your name at all, just a similar sound. Maybe you imagined it, but you didn't. You've lived long enough to know the tone people use when danger is close, when guilt is near, even if no one says it outright. And this was that tone. You sit at the table and pour a cup of water. It tastes like fear. You try to sip slowly, but your hand still trembles just enough to ripple the surface. You begin to wonder what you've done. Not in the dramatic, "oh, I committed heresy" sort of way, but the subtler sins, the careless comment during a harvest festival, that time you skipped Mass to help your cousin give birth, that dream you confessed to a friend where you saw the Virgin Mary as a shadow instead of a light. You remember a time years ago when you laughed at a street performer's imitation of a priest's voice. It wasn't even funny, but you laughed, loudly. Could that be it? Historians still argue whether the Inquisition hunted heresy or just fear itself, whether it was religion enforcing law or law enforcing obedience. You breathe deeply. It doesn't help. Later that day, while folding your laundry, you find an old letter. It's from a merchant cousin in Valencia. You remember him vaguely smelled like onions and always wore too much cologne. The letter talks about trade marriage and a recent wedding where a Sephardic song was played. You'd kept it because he included a recipe for honeyed almonds. It had felt harmless, domestic, comforting. Now it feels radioactive. You burn it. Not dramatically, just quietly. One edge in the flame folded once turned to black. You don't even watch the ashes. You don't want to remember how quickly innocence turns into fuel. Later, you go to the market. You speak less. You don't ask the cheese seller about his wife's health or the melon vendor about his broken cartwheel. You just hand over coins, take your things, and leave. And still your name seems to hover like smoke that knows your scent. A friar walks past you. You nod. He nods. But his pause is a fraction too long. You wonder if he's remembering something about you, or if he just has a stone in his sandal. Either way, the damage is done. That night you double bar the door, not because you expect visitors, but because you no longer trust that you'd hear them coming. You try to sleep. You fail. Not because of nightmares, because of the silence. It presses in, heavy, intentional. You realize that silence is louder when you know someone might be listening. You've lived here for years, tucked between the baker's courtyard and the alley that always smells like rosemary and spoiled wine. The neighbors know your routines. You rise early. You scrub your steps. You bless your bread. You speak in measured tones and rarely raise your voice, even when the dog from across the street eats your herbs. But now the neighbors pretend they don't know you. It starts small. The smith's wife, who once gifted you basil from her window box, now waters her plants with her back to you. The butcher used to nod, sometimes offer the end of a sausage as a joke. Now his hands are always too full to wave. Children who once tugged at your sleeve for coins now pretend to be fascinated by rocks whenever you walk by. It's not hatred, it's self-preservation. That peculiar cruelty of silence that says, we don't hate you, we just don't want to be next. You walk the street like a ghost wearing your own skin. The shutters close softly, not all at once, but enough for you to hear the rhythm. Tap, slide, click, like a metronome to fear. No one shouts. No one accuses you. But no one greets you either. And that is almost worse. You begin to doubt everything. Did you say something strange at last week's gathering? Did you pause too long before crossing yourself in mass? Did someone see you with the notary? You ask yourself questions that make no sense because logic doesn't survive long in a climate like this. The Inquisition isn't a thing that shouts. It whispers, nods, steps lightly, and watches how others respond. You try to busy yourself. You scrub the floor, even though it's clean. You realign the few books you own until they are in perfect, meaningless order. You stop singing while you work, not because of guilt, because of optics. There's a fear of seeming too cheerful, too odd, too anything, because anything can be interpreted as something. You recall a story your uncle told when you were small about a merchant in Cordoba who was burned not for blasphemy, but because his neighbor's parrot once repeated a Hebrew phrase it had overheard. Historians still debate whether the story is true, your uncle said, but what matters is that people believed it. And belief, you're learning, is more dangerous than fact. One afternoon you catch a glimpse of Leona again, the neighbor, the one who warned you about Mateo. She's walking briskly, scarf drawn low, carrying a basket too light for market goods. You nod. She doesn't nod back. That's when the chill really sets in. Because you realize she knows something you don't. Or she suspects something you haven't even considered. Or maybe she simply can't afford to be seen acknowledging you. You go home, the bread is stale. You eat it anyway slowly, as if chewing might stop your thoughts. A shadow crosses your window. Just a bird, probably. But you start to close your shutters too. You tell yourself it's for shade, but really, it's because you want to vanish before someone else decides to help you disappear. The next morning, a child leaves a flower on your doorstep. A daisy. Just one. No note. No explanation. You stare at it for too long. Because the flower is not the danger. It's the question of who saw it placed there, and what they'll assume it means. You spend the night turning the daisy over in your hand. It's wilted by now, its stem soft and warm from your fingers, but you still haven't thrown it away. Not because you're sentimental, because you're indecisive. Every action feels layered with consequence now. Throw it away too quickly, and someone might say you're hiding a message. Leave it out too long, and someone might accuse you of flaunting a secret symbol. In a world governed by whispers and symbols, even a daisy can become dangerous. You place it between the pages of your psalter, careful not to damage the binding. Then you shove the book to the back of your cupboard, behind the jar of lentils and the bottle of vinegar that's older than your niece. By morning, your mind is a tangle. So you do what you always do. When panic threatens to make a home in your ribs, you clean. You scrub the threshold again. You beat the cushions, even though no one has sat on them in days. You polish the candlesticks and stack your clay bowls in careful symmetry. It helps, but only slightly. You're not chasing cleanliness. You're chasing control. Because the truth is, you don't know what's happening. Not really. And that unknown is the most terrifying thing of all. You consider confession. Not religious confession, though you've thought about that too, but the other kind. The kind that happens behind doors too thick to hear through. The kind that starts with a glance and ends with parchment and blood. The kind the Inquisition might consider favorable. You've heard of people turning themselves in, not because they're guilty, because they're scared, and because in some twisted logic it seems safer to be the one who speaks first. There's a rumor about a merchant who confessed before he was accused, claimed he'd unknowingly repeated a heretical phrase during a tavern joke. The Inquisition thanked him for his honesty, made him pay a fine, and let him go. Another version says they let him go, and then followed him for 5 years. Historians still argue whether early confession saved lives or marked them for slow destruction. You look around your home. It's not much, but it's yours, and you'd rather not burn it down just to avoid the match. Still, the thought lingers. So, you visit Father Ronaldo, not officially, not even during confession hours, just quietly during midday prayers when the church is mostly empty. You sit in the back pew, hands folded too tightly to be casual. He sees you, doesn't smile, just walks slowly to the end of the aisle and sits, leaving a polite space between you. Enough for plausible deniability. You whisper, "How do you know if you've sinned, if no one tells you what the sin is?" He breathes in deeply as if weighing the question. Then says, "Sometimes the devil whispers, but sometimes the silence is his voice too. Not helpful, but somehow honest." You ask if someone confesses, not a crime, just a feeling. What happens? He turns his head slowly, looks at you, really looks at you for the first time in years, and says, "If you're looking for mercy, child, seek it in God. If you're looking for protection, you won't find it here." That night you don't sleep. You watch the candle burn down to its final nub. You don't light another. You just sit there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the street, the clack of hooves, the distant chatter, the bark of a dog that sounds too close to a scream. And you imagine what it would be like to speak first, to walk into the Inquisition office, to say, "I had a dream where I saw a golden goat, and I didn't know if it was holy." Or, "I once read a line of poetry that didn't mention God." Or, "I questioned whether bread becomes flesh, not because I disbelieve, but because I wanted to understand." Would they nod? Would they write it down? Would they say, "Thank you, child," and offer you a wafer and a blessing? Or would they smile just slightly and call for the guards? You've heard of false confessions too. People so terrified they confess to things that never happened, that they didn't even understand. A woman who said she once saw a Jewish man breathe near a holy relic. A boy who claimed his uncle turned water into frogs. None of it was real. All of it ended in chains. You make a decision. You won't confess. Not because you're brave, because you're not sure what you'd say. Instead, you decide to make yourself smaller. You wear duller clothes. You stop going to market at busy hours. You pray more, but never too loudly. You speak only when spoken to, and even then, your words are measured in teaspoons. You become the shadow of yourself, and people stop noticing you, which is exactly what you wanted, until you realize that being invisible is its own kind of danger, because shadows are easy to blame. Someone scratches a small mark onto your door. It could be nothing, a child with a rock, a splinter from the hinge. Or it could be a message. You wipe it off before you can think too hard about it. But the message, real or imagined, stays burned in your mind. Because now, you're not just someone who might have sinned. You're someone who looks like they're hiding something. You go to the well again. There are fewer women now. Fewer greetings. You catch one of them watching you, not with hatred, with pity. And that somehow is worse. Because it means she already sees you as gone. You walk home with your water. And that's when you realize it. You haven't spoken to anyone in 2 days. Not one word. Your voice feels dusty, unused. You try to hum as you walk, just to hear something. But the sound catches in your throat. Because in a city full of whispers, even a tune can be considered a confession. You don't know what morning it is anymore. The days have begun to blend together like overcooked porridge, warm gray, unremarkable. You used to count time by the sound of the bells from the monastery tower, lauds at dawn, vespers at dusk. Now you just listen for footsteps, particularly those that pause a second too long outside your door. The city hasn't changed, not really. The bakers still rise before dawn. The blacksmith's hammer still sings like it's arguing with the wind, and the fishmonger's stall still reeks in the afternoon sun. But everything has a new undertone, like the background hum of something waiting, watching. You're walking home one afternoon with a bundle of greens and a stale crust when you hear it again, your name. This time it's not whispered. It's said aloud softly but deliberately, like someone sliding a coin across a table in secret. You stop mid-step, not to respond, just to listen. The voice is male, familiar maybe, from the parish, from the street. You can't tell. It's gone by the time you turn your head. Whoever said it didn't mean to start a conversation, just to tag you, like scratching your name on a list. When you get home, the shutters are ajar, not wide, but just enough to make you uneasy. You didn't leave them that way. You tell yourself it was the wind, but you know better. Inside, the Psalter is still in the cupboard, the daisy still pressed between its pages, the cups still stacked. The room is untouched, but something feels missing. Not an object, something else. You sit on your stool and listen. The silence is no longer neutral. It has chosen a side. You begin to pray quietly under your breath. The same words you've said since childhood. They sound unfamiliar now, like a play recited in a language you barely remember. You keep going anyway, because that's what you do when nothing else makes sense. You pretend the ritual is enough. Later at dusk, there's a knock. 3 times. Not gentle, not violent, just certain. You don't answer right away. You wait, holding your breath, heart suddenly tight in your chest. You whisper to yourself, it's just a neighbor, just a knock. Then again, 3 knocks, the same pace, the same weight. Not a neighbor. You open the door a crack. It's not who you feared. It's worse. It's the boy from the Inquisition office. Young, maybe 16, with cheeks still holding on to childhood, but eyes that already know too much. He doesn't look at you directly. He holds out a folded piece of parchment. No wax seal, no name on the outside. You take it. He turns, walks away. Not a word. You close the door. You don't open the parchment right away. Instead, you stare at it like it might bleed ink through your fingers, like it might bite. When you do unfold it, your hands shake just slightly. The message is short. You are to present yourself at the Office of Holy Inquiry at the third bell tomorrow. Bring no one. Do not delay. No signature. No greeting. You read it 3 times. Each time the words grow heavier. You wonder if Leona got one like this, or if she didn't need a letter. Maybe she was simply taken. You think about running. It's foolish, of course. Where would you go? Even if you could disappear, the Inquisition has a long reach, and no passport is stronger than suspicion. You sit back down. Your chair feels harder than usual. You stare at the letter. You read it a 4th time, looking for a loophole, some ambiguity, some wiggle room. There is none. You light a candle, not because it's dark, because you need a flame to look at that isn't inside your chest. You consider what to wear. It's absurd in a way, but you think about it. Should you look devout, plain like someone with nothing to hide? You pull out your simplest tunic, no embroidery, no color, just humble cloth, the kind that makes you look forgettable. You lay it over the back of the chair and stare at it like a warning. Sleep doesn't come. You lie down, but your body is alert. As if your bones know something your brain hasn't admitted. Around midnight, you hear footsteps in the street. 2 pairs. Boots. You close your eyes and pretend to sleep, just in case. They pass, but you don't open your eyes for a long while. You think of the men who confessed before they were tortured, and the ones who confessed after, and the ones who didn't confess at all, but still vanished. Historians still argue whether the Inquisition truly believed it was saving souls or simply enforcing power. You decide it doesn't matter, because either way, you have to show up tomorrow, and either way, you won't be the same after. When the bells toll once in the distance, you are already dressed. You sit on the edge of the bed and wait for the second bell. It rings. Then you walk, slowly, as if each step might delay the moment, as if the stones themselves could save you. They don't. They never have. The morning air is cold, but not enough to bite, just enough to feel like it's trying to keep you awake. You walk with your head down, not in shame, not in defiance, just in the hope that if you don't look anyone in the eye, they'll return the favor. You pass the baker's stall. He sees you. You know he sees you, but he busies himself brushing flour off a perfectly clean counter. You smell oranges from a nearby vendor. Someone laughs loudly 2 streets over. The sound cuts like a blade. Joy always seems louder when you're walking toward a place that can unmake you. You round the corner. There it is, the Office of Holy Inquiry. It's smaller than you expected, not a towering cathedral or a dark dungeon with dripping chains. Just a building of stone, too clean, too symmetrical. The windows are narrow and high, designed to let light in, not out. You stand in front of the door, no guard, no sign, just the weight of history pressing down like a too tight collar. You knock. Once, the door opens without a sound, no creak, no moan. A man in robes gestures you in. He doesn't speak. You follow. The hallway is short. The air is heavy with the scent of old parchment and melted wax. It smells like silence that's been archived. You're led to a room, small, wooden table, 2 chairs. One of them is already occupied. The man at the table is old, thin. His face is clean-shaven, but his eyes are the kind that once saw something terrible and decided never to blink again. He doesn't introduce himself. He just gestures for you to sit. So you do. He says, "You've been observed." 3 words. No preamble, no accusation. Just a statement, dropped like a pebble into a well. You swallow. Observed how he doesn't answer, just writes something down. Your hands are on your knees. You make sure they don't shake. He says, "Do you know why you're here?" There's no right answer. "No," you say carefully. He nods, as if that confirms something. Then, "Have you spoken with any conversos in the past month?" You pause. Not because you're guilty, because you're doing the math. Who counts? Who qualifies? What if you didn't know? You say, "Not that I'm aware." He looks up at you slowly. You wonder if that's the moment you just failed the test. He says, "Have you questioned doctrine?" You almost laugh. Not because it's funny, but because who hasn't? You've lived through famine, plague, and heartbreak. Of course you've had questions, but you know what he means. "No," you say. He taps his pen. He says, "And yet, that's all. And yet." 2 words that could mean anything or everything. He stands, walks behind you. You don't turn around. He says, "Your neighbors say you do not sing anymore, that you used to." You blink. "This is the evidence I still sing," you say, just not as loudly. He walks to the far wall. There's a single window high up with dust caught in the edges. He says faith like song is best expressed aloud. You don't respond. He turns. "Do you pray yes? To whom you hesitate?" And he notices. You say, "To God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit." He waits. You add the Virgin Mary. He nods slowly, writes something again. You try to peek at the parchment. You can't. He says, "You received a letter recently." Your mouth goes dry. You don't ask how he knows. You just nod. "Did you show it to anyone?" "No." "Did anyone else touch it?" "No." He seems pleased, which somehow is worse. He walks back to the chair and sits. He says, "Do you know a woman named Leona?" And there it is, her name dropped like a stone in still water. You say, "She lives down the street." "Do you speak often?" "Not recently." "Why not I?" "Don't know." He leans back. His eyes narrow slightly. You realize he's watching your mouth now. not your eyes, as if your lips will betray what your words won't. He says she confessed. You freeze. Then to what? He smiles faintly, to seeing you with a psalter. You blink. I own a psalter, you say. It's not illegal, unless it is annotated. It isn't, unless it contains pressed materials of suspicious symbolism. You don't breathe. Then say it has a flower in it, a daisy. Why, I didn't know where else to put it. He smiles again, then says, tell me about the flower. And suddenly you understand. This isn't about what you believe. It's about how well you perform the belief. You describe the daisy, how it looked, where it came from, how it reminded you of your mother. He writes all of it down. He folds his hands and says, we will speak again, soon. Then he nods to the boy at the door. You are dismissed. No sentence, no verdict, just the promise of return. You walk home. Every step feels too loud. You keep thinking about the daisy and whether describing it truthfully was the right answer, or if you were supposed to lie. You don't go straight home. You walk past your street, past the square, past the alley where children used to kick stones and pretend they were soldiers. Now the stones lie untouched, and the children whisper instead of play. You pass the old woman who sells dried rosemary. She doesn't look up. You wonder if she heard, if she knows. You keep walking. You don't have a destination. You just need to not be there. Not yet. Your home feels like a trap waiting to be sprung, like sitting in your own grave and wondering who holds the shovel. Eventually, your feet take you to the church, not for guidance, for stillness. Inside, the air is cool and smells faintly of beeswax and damp stone, the kind of air that remembers centuries of secrets. You sit in the back pew again. Father Rinaldo is at the front, lighting candles with a metal taper that swings gently with each step. He doesn't turn, but he speaks. You went. You nod, though he can't see it. He says you're lucky. You wait. He adds, this time you ask, why would they ask about a flower? He doesn't answer for a long time, then says, because when you can't prosecute thoughts, you prosecute symbols. You stare at the altar. The candles flicker. He says, in the last round of inquiries, they arrested a man for humming a tune that didn't appear in the liturgical calendar. That can't be true. He looks at you. Do you want it to be? You don't respond because you know the answer, and you hate it. You leave before the evening prayers begin. Walking home, you catch a glimpse of someone pulling a curtain back on the second floor across the street, just long enough to make eye contact, just long enough to confirm you're being watched. You enter your home like it might explode. Nothing is out of place, but you know better than to relax. You go to the cupboard, take out the psalter. You open to the pressed daisy. It's gone. You stare at the crease where it was. The imprint is still there, a faint outline, but the flower is missing. You don't scream. You don't gasp. You just Sit down slowly as the implications bloom faster than any daisy ever could. Someone was in your home. Someone went straight to the thing that mattered and didn't take the book, didn't steal your food, just the flower. You try to think of what that means. You fail. All you can do is sit there and stare at the hollow page. That night you try to sleep. You really do. But every creak of wood, every shift of wind outside the window sounds like breath. You begin to write things down. You don't know why. Maybe to remember later. Maybe because if something happens, you want someone to understand it wasn't random, that it didn't start with you. You write. They asked about the daisy. The daisy is gone. Someone has been here. You don't sign your name. You don't date it. You hide the page behind a loose tile under your cot. You don't know if that's smart or foolish, but it feels like something. The next morning, you don't go to market. You don't light your candle. You don't open the shutters. You just sit, still, listening, waiting, until there's a knock. But not the kind you fear. It's softer, familiar. You open the door and find Leona, alive, but thinner, paler, her scarf pulled low over her forehead as if trying to hide a bruise. She doesn't smile. She just says, "Can I come in?" You let her. You make tea, though. Your hand shakes so much you spill water on the coals and nearly put the fire out. She sits in silence, then says, "I didn't name you." You look up. She continues, "I named myself." You say nothing. She says, "They brought up your name, but not from me." You ask, "Then who?" She shakes her head. "I don't know, but it doesn't matter." You ask, "Why not?" And she leans in. Her voice drops to a whisper. "Because they already have you. You. The rest is just ritual." You feel cold. She finishes her tea, stands, says, "I'm leaving. Tonight. I have cousins in the mountains. They won't take me in, but they won't turn me out either." You nod. She pauses at the door, says, "Don't wait for them to knock again." Then she's gone. You close the door, you lean against it, and you wonder for the first time what it would mean to disappear, not because you're guilty, but because staying might be worse. The next morning you do something bold, not reckless, not loud, just bold in the quiet way a candle is bold in a dark hallway. You leave your shutters open, just a crack. Enough to say, "I see you too." You sweep your floor. You hum, not a hymn, not a folk tune, just a melody without a name. Something old and unremarkable. The kind of thing that could be mistaken for wind in a hallway or breath in a dream. You take the psalter and wrap it in cloth. You place it under your pillow, not because it will protect you, but because it feels wrong to leave it alone now, like letting a witness sleep outside. Around midday, you dress in your simplest clothes again and walk to the notary's office. Not the Inquisition, the regular one, the civil kind. He looks up, surprised to see you. You ask for a sheet of parchment and access to a legal witness. He raises an eyebrow. You say you're updating your oaths. He shrugs, brings you what you asked for. You sit and begin to write. You swear allegiance to the church. You affirm your loyalty to the crown. You confess no ties to heretical thought or practice. It's dry. It's formal. It's defensive. But sometimes survival is written in ink, not blood. The notary signs it. You sign it. You both pretend it will matter. As you leave, he touches your wrist gently, then says, "They asked for my ledger last week." You nod. He says, "Your name wasn't on it." You nod again, unsure if that's a good sign or a warning. You walk home. You find yourself glancing behind you more often now. Not because someone's following, because one day someone will. You light a candle before sunset. You boil water, even though you're not hungry. The act of preparation is comfort. You sit in your chair and think about Leona and her face, the bruised side she tried to hide. You wonder if she made it to the mountains. You wonder if the cousins left a blanket out. You wonder if she took her psalter with her. Night settles like dust. You pull the curtains but leave them slightly parted. You want the stars to know you're still here. Sleep doesn't come. It sidles up, then slips away like a cat you didn't feed. Somewhere near dawn, you hear a bird call. Not a songbird, a crow. One. Then another. You rise, dress again, and wait. The knock comes as expected. This time it's not the boy. It's a different man. Older. Rounder. He has a ledger tucked under his arm. He says, "You've been scheduled." You ask, "For what?" He says, "Oath, renewal, public affirmation." You blink. "I already renewed at the civil office." He smiles like you just made a very childish mistake. He says, "This one's different." He hands you a sealed parchment. Heavy. Too heavy for something that should be simple. You break the seal. Inside is a single sentence. You are to appear before the tribunal at second bell to affirm your devotion in the presence of Holy Record. That's it. No reason. No accusation. Just an appointment with judgment. You nod. He leaves. You sit. The fire has gone out. The water you boiled earlier is cold. You think about drinking it anyway. You don't. Instead, you prepare. Again. You rehearse the Nicene Creed. You repeat it until the words feel like stone in your mouth. Not heavy, just dull. You look at yourself in the shard of mirror on the wall. You try to smile. It doesn't quite reach your eyes. The street is empty when you leave. Your steps are soft. You arrive at the hall and are greeted by 2 guards. They say nothing. Just open the door. Inside, it's colder than it should be. The tribunal sits behind a high table. 3 men, 1 woman, all dressed in the same robe, black, with a crimson sash. The notary from the other day is there too in the corner. He doesn't meet your eyes. They ask you to kneel. You do. They ask if you are willing to reaffirm your devotion to the church and to the Holy Office. You say yes. They ask you to repeat a phrase. You do. Then they ask if you would denounce heresy if you saw it. You pause, then say, if I recognized it, yes. The room goes very still. The woman on the tribunal leans forward. She says, explain what you mean by recognize. You say, if I understand it as heresy, I would report it. She nods, but doesn't look satisfied. They murmur among themselves. Then they ask you to place your hand on the psalter they provide. Not yours, theirs. You do. They watch. They say nothing. You stand when told. You're dismissed. No verdict. No congratulations. No confirmation. Just the sense that you've survived a test you weren't told existed, and that another one is coming. You don't go straight home this time either. You wander past familiar windows and unfamiliar shadows, through alleyways that feel too quiet, through sunlight that feels too bright. You keep thinking of that tribunal table, the four faces, the red sashes, the way they stared like they were looking through your answers to find the sin between the lines. You wonder if one of them wrote your name, or if they all did. You make it home eventually. The door is still ajar from when you left. You close it gently. You do not lock it. Locking it feels like a statement, like resistance. You light a candle. Again. You sit down at the small table where you once shelled peas for stew. You press your fingertips against the wood. Feel the indentations from past meals. Little scars from knives and elbows. It's the most human thing in your house. Then you stand. Go to the cot. Pull out the loose tile. The note is still there. They asked about the daisy. The daisy is gone. Someone has been here. You add a new line. They asked again, but softer this time. You fold it up and place it back. That ritual, folding, tucking, returning, has become its own prayer. That night the candle burns down farther than usual. You let it. You need the company. You hear voices outside at one point, not whispers, laughter. A group passing through, probably drunk, carefree. Their joy feels foreign, like a song in a language you once knew but forgot after too many winters. Eventually, you sleep and you dream. In the dream, you're standing in the tribunal chamber again. But it's empty. The chairs are gone. The windows are bricked over. And in the center of the room is the daisy perfect hole pressed between two stones. You try to reach for it, but the room keeps stretching, like it's breathing. When you wake, you're cold. You check the door. Still closed, but your psalter is on the floor, face down. You didn't leave it there. You pick it up with careful fingers. Flip through the pages. Nothing seems missing. But now you're not sure what missing means. The next day you return to the chapel. Father Ronaldo is there again. He doesn't smile. You sit beside him in the second pew this time. He asks, have they asked you to name names yet? You shake your head. He says, they will. You whisper, what should I say? He looks at you, eyes heavy, says whatever keeps you breathing. You ask, even if it's not true. He sighs, then says, especially then. That silence hangs between you like incense. You ask him if he's ever named anyone. He doesn't answer. And that is the answer. You leave before Mass. Outside, a man hands you a folded parchment. No seal this time. No smile either. You wait until he's gone, then open it. Inside is a single line, "You will be called again." Prepare yourself. You read it 3 times. There's no date, no name, just the promise of repetition. You burn the note, not dramatically, just quietly over the hearth. It curls into black lace and vanishes. You eat half a piece of bread. You drink cold water. You reread your psalter. You don't sleep that night. Not because you're afraid, but because you've started to wonder whether sleep is the most dangerous time of all, when your dreams might betray you before your mouth ever does. Around dawn, someone knocks. Not the door, the window. You freeze. You don't breathe. A second knock. You creep toward it. Peel back the corner of the curtain. It's Leona, alive. Again. She looks worse. Eyes sunken. Lips dry. But she's here, You unlatch the window. She says, "I shouldn't be here." You say, "Then why are you?" She says, "To warn you." You let her in. She doesn't sit. She just says, "They're not asking anymore. They're offering." You blink. Offering what redemption? If you name 2, your stomach sinks. She says, "That's what they told me. Name 2. And you leave with your soul intact. You ask, "Did you?" She doesn't answer. Instead, she says, "They want you next." You nod. She adds, "Not because of what you've done, because of how quiet you are." Quiet makes them nervous. You ask, "What should I do?" She says, "Write your own truth," before they do. Then she's gone again, like fog. You close the window. You light a new candle. And for the first time you begin to write, not for safety, but for memory. You start with your name, the one they keep forgetting to use. You write your name the way your mother used to say it softly, like a lullaby too quiet for the neighbors to overhear. It feels strange to see it on paper, like confessing something you didn't know was a secret. You don't stop there. You write about the Rosemary woman and how her hands trembled when she handed you change for the last time. You write about Father Ronaldo and the way he prays with his eyes open. You write about Leona twice, once as a neighbor, once as a warning. You write about the daisy, not the flower itself, but what it meant, what it didn't mean, what others might pretend it meant. You write because it's the only control left to you. By the time the candle burns out, you've filled 4 pages. You fold them carefully, slide them under your cot next to the other note, now yellowing at the edges. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. The wood looks older than you remembered, creaks with every change in your breath. You imagine the ceiling collapsing just slightly and burying all this with it. And for a moment that idea doesn't feel like fear. It feels like quiet. The next morning, the summons arrives, sealed again, this time with red wax instead of black. Inside it says, "Tribunal Review Allegiance Confirmation." public session. Witnesses required. You know what that means. They want you to name someone, or they already think you have. You spend the day cleaning, not out of nervous energy, out of guilt, as if your floor might forgive you for what you're about to become. You wear your best clothes, which means the ones with the fewest holes. You brush your hair, not out of vanity, but because looking presentable feels like armor. You don't bring the Psalter. This time it might look suspicious. The square outside the tribunal is fuller than usual. Not crowded, just alert, like a theater right before the curtain lifts. They let you in. The same room, the same faces, but more chairs now lined behind you. Witnesses, maybe townsfolk, maybe others awaiting their turn, maybe both. You are asked to stand in the center. You do. The woman from before leans forward, says, "You've been noted as withholding." You say nothing. She says, "We respect devotion, but silence can be a mask." Another tribunal member, a younger man with ink-stained fingers, says, "We are not asking for blood, only for clarity." You nod. The woman says, "Then let's begin." They ask about the daisy. Again. You say, "I do not know who placed it." They ask, "Do you have enemies?" You say, "Not until recently." There's a chuckle in the back. Not loud, but enough. They ask if you have seen heresy. You answer, "Not knowingly." They ask if you've heard anything suspicious. You say, "I hear my own breath, louder than anything else these days." That one earns another chuckle. You don't turn to see who it was. The woman frowns. She says, "We will ask plainly. Can you name someone whose faith you question?" And here it is. The choice. Leona's face flashes in your mind. So does Father Ronaldo's. So does your own reflection. You open your mouth and you say, "Myself." A pause, a long one. She says, "Explain." You say, "I doubt. I fear. I forget lines. I hesitate. I wonder why things are the way they are." If that is heresy, then yes, I am guilty. Silence. Thick and warm like honey that's gone to rot. Someone coughs. Another whispers. The tribunal says nothing. Eventually, the woman nods. She writes something down. Says, "That will be noted. You're dismissed. Not escorted. Not detained. Just dismissed." The walk-out feels longer than the walk-in. You step into the sun, blinking, expecting applause or gasps. But the square is already looking past you. There's someone else behind you now. Their turn. You walk home. No one speaks to you on the way. No one throws stones. No one smiles. And that somehow is worse. At home you find a new daisy. On your windowsill. You don't touch it. You don't take it inside. You just sit beside it. And for the first time you laugh. Quietly. Because now you know whatever happens next, it won't be for something you didn't say. It will be for something you did. And that strangely feels like peace. You don't throw the daisy away. You leave it where it is, watching how the petals curl and fade by nightfall. You want it to decay naturally. Let the wind decide its ending. That evening you finally eat something small, lentils with a bit of vinegar. You chew slowly, as if the meal might vanish mid-bite, as if gratitude might preserve it. When you lie down that night, you don't hide your psalter. You place it on the table by your cot, in full view, open to a random page. If they come, let them see it. Let them read whatever verse is showing and draw their own conclusions. You're tired of hiding your faith like a stain. You fall asleep before the candle burns out, and this time you dream of rain, not floods, not storms, just steady, cooling rain, enough to soften the dirt and quiet the noise. You wake up with dampness in your eyes, and you don't know if it's from the dream or something else. A parchment is pushed under the door. No seal. You unfurl it. We seek further clarification. Be at the inquiry house at third bell. No date. Just the bell. You feel like time itself is becoming less real. A loop of bells and walking and questions and waiting. You don't dress up this time. You wear your work clothes. Let them interpret it however they like. The inquiry house is not the tribunal hall. It's smaller, less formal, more intimate in the way a butcher's table is intimate. You're close enough to see the blade. Inside is one man, not a familiar face. He gestures to a chair across from him. No guards, no scribes, no red sash. You sit. He begins with a strange question. Do you believe fear is holy? You pause, then ask, for whom? He raises an eyebrow. You say, fear teaches, but it doesn't save. He nods like that's an answer he's heard before. He tells you he's not part of the tribunal, that he is, in his words, a companion of clarity, which sounds lovely until you realize it means the one they send when the others don't get what they want. He leans in, asks if you know of any gatherings, private prayer circles, reading sessions. You answer truthfully, not since the baker died. He makes a note. He asks if you've ever read books not sanctioned by the church. You say, only ones with broken spines and missing pages. He doesn't smile. You don't either. He shifts tactics, asks you what faith means to you. You say, it's like breathing. Most days, I don't notice it. But when it's gone, everything else stops. He says nothing. But he doesn't write that down. Then he says, you understand what's happening here, don't you? You nod. He says, this isn't about guilt. It's about alignment. You ask, with what he says, with power. And just like that, the curtain lifts. The farce is acknowledged. This isn't about heresy. Not really. It's about loyalty, submission, predictability. He asks if you're willing to name someone. You say, I've already named myself. He says, that was poetic, but not useful. You ask, useful to whom? He sighs, leans back, looks suddenly very tired, says, they won't push much harder. Not if you keep quiet. You ask, and if I don't? He shrugs, says, then your silence becomes dangerous again. You sit there for a long moment. Then you say, I'd rather be dangerous than dishonest. He doesn't flinch. He just says, "Noted." And that's the end of the conversation. You leave. The streets feel heavier, like someone stretched a veil over the city while you were gone. You go home. There's no Daisy this time. No note. But there's something new. The notary from before. He's sitting on your stoop. Just sitting. You approach slowly. He doesn't rise. He says, "They asked for your ledger again." You ask, "What did you give them?" He looks at you, says nothing. They didn't already suspect, which of course means everything. He adds, "They want to close your file." You blink. What does that mean? He shrugs. It means your name moves to the bottom, unless something new appears. You want to feel relief. You really do. But something about bottom sounds more like a grave than a reprieve. Still, you nod. He rises, hands you a small scroll, says, "This is for you. Don't open it until you're somewhere quiet." You don't ask what it is. You just thank him. He leaves without another word. You go inside. You sit. You wait until the candle is half gone. Then you unroll the scroll. It's not an order. It's a prayer. But not one sanctioned by the church. It's old, worn, the ink smudged in places. At the bottom, a simple sentence. If you remember who you are, they can't take it. You don't cry. But your breath hitches in that way it does when something important breaks loose in your chest. You tuck the scroll beside your psalter. Not hidden, just placed like something sacred. You don't leave the house for 2 days. Not because you're scared, at least not in the same way as before. It's more like your body has finally realized what your mind's been trying to ignore. Survival takes energy, and you're running low. The daisy has dried on the windowsill. You don't move it. It feels like a marker. Now, a timestamp of who you were before the tribunal, before the scroll, before Leona's knock in the dark. You spend most of the day reading, not the psalter, not the scroll, just old notary entries, your own writing from a time when dates and debts felt like the most urgent thing in the world. You chuckle at how serious you were about ink smudges and line breaks. There's comfort in the past, even if it's just paperwork. By the 3rd day, the weather changes. Wind blows in from the south, bringing dust and rumors. You open your window for the first time in weeks. A neighbor walks past. They don't speak, but they nod. It's quick, barely noticeable, but it's a nod. You feel it in your stomach, first like hunger, and maybe it is a kind of hunger, the craving to be seen as human again. You nod back. Later, a knock at the door. You freeze. Because now, even a nod brings consequences. You open it slowly. It's the butcher's boy, the one who used to bring scraps for your old dog. He hands you a small cloth bundle. Doesn't say a word. Inside, 2 potatoes and a sprig of thyme. You say thank you. He shrugs and walks off. You close the door and lean against it. You haven't eaten that well in a month. You boil the potatoes slowly. Let the thyme perfume the air. It's the kind of small act that could be labeled as suspicious generosity if seen by the wrong person. But for once you don't care. That night, you do something foolish. You write again, not for clarity, not for confession, for memory. You write about your dreams, about the daisy, about Leona, about fear, about the man in the inquiry house, and the question he didn't ask. What would you have done differently if you'd known no one was watching? You let the ink bleed a little. Let the letters curve where they want. Then you hide it, not under the tile, not under the cot. You take it to the back wall and lift a loose floorboard, the one you've always meant to fix. Inside there are already 3 mouse-chewed seeds and a bone button. Now there's also your truth. The next day, someone has written on your door, just a symbol, a crude eye, drawn in ash or old ink. You wipe it away with a cloth, but you don't forget it. You ask yourself if it's a warning, a signal, a test. Historians still argue whether these marks were coded messages between sympathizers or just the idle graffiti of frightened minds. But standing there with the cloth in your hand, you realize it doesn't matter. The meaning is decided by whoever sees it. You go back inside. You sweep again, even though the floor is clean. You say your prayers aloud even though the walls don't echo like they used to. You think of Father Ronaldo, of his advice, whatever keeps you breathing. But you don't want to just breathe anymore. You want to live. So the next day, you make a decision. You go to the baker's old house. It's boarded up. You climb through the side where the planks never held properly. Inside it still smells faintly of flour and smoke. You open the old cupboard behind the hearth. There's a hollow space there, like you remembered. Inside it, a scrap of parchment. On it, names. Names you recognize. Names you've whispered only in memory. Names of people who vanished in the early weeks before everything got quiet. You stare at it for a long time, and then you burn it. You could have kept it, used it, traded it. Instead, you let it go, not for forgiveness, for peace, for one less weapon in the wrong hands. You leave the house as the smoke trails up into the open window, curling like incense, or a final prayer no one gets to hear. Back at home, another note. No seal, no signature, just 4 words. You are being watched. You smile, because of course you are. Everyone is. But not everyone knows it. And somehow knowing makes you less afraid. You place the note beside the daisy on the windowsill. Let them both age in the open. This time you don't write anything back. Some things don't need answers. Some things are the answer. You start walking again. Not far. Just to the corner where the olive seller used to shout his prices like a town crier in a rush. He's gone now, of course, taken in for tax evasion or blasphemy or something that sounded official enough to excuse the cart being confiscated. But the spot is still his. And standing there, reminds you that some things remain even after the people attached to them don't. You lean against the wall and watch the square, not with paranoia, just with presence. You're no longer hiding, you're studying. A woman drops her basket. 3 people help her pick it up. 2 weeks ago, they would have stepped over it. That evening, you pass by the tribunal hall. Again, you don't go in. You don't need to. There's a new notice on the door. A list of names, concluded investigations. Yours is there. Misspelled, but close enough. It doesn't say cleared. It doesn't say absolved. Just concluded, which in this city is the kindest thing you can hope for. You go home with a loaf of bread and the smallest wedge of goat cheese. A splurge, but it's worth it. You eat slowly, savor every bite like it might be the last meal before silence returns. Later, you hear singing, not loud, not even in tune, but real. Somewhere near the square, a child's voice repeating a hymn that hasn't been sung in public in months. You smile, but you don't join in, not yet. You light a candle, not for prayer, for warmth, for light, to see your own face in the flickering glow, to remind yourself that you're still here. You take out the Psalter. You turn to the page with the oil stain on the corner proof that once you were careless with something holy. And you read, not because someone told you to, not because someone might be watching, but because you want to. Because sometimes the quietest defiance is to keep doing the things that used to make you human. You sleep well that night. No dreams, just breath and stillness. When you wake, there's another note, tucked under the breadboard, in smaller handwriting. Thank you for burning the list. You freeze, then smile. Someone new, someone else remembers. You're not alone. You want to write back, but you don't. Because this isn't a conversation anymore. It's something better. It's trust. You clean the house for the first time in a way that feels like preparation instead of desperation. You hang herbs by the door, not for protection, but because you like the way they smell. You brush the dust from your best shoes, not because you expect company, but because you might go somewhere tomorrow. In the market, a woman slips you a small cloth. Inside 3 cloves of garlic and a sprig of mint. You say nothing, she says nothing, but it feels like a promise, and that's more than words. Historians still argue whether small acts of kindness during the Inquisition were signs of resistance or simply survival. You decide it doesn't matter. They kept people going. That's enough. You write again that night. But this time it's not a confession. It's a recipe. Potato, garlic, mint. Boil slow. Stir with care. Serve warm. You laugh as you write. You're recording a meal like it's sacred scripture. Maybe it is. Maybe remembering how to nourish yourself is a kind of faith. You tuck the paper beside the Psalter. The candle burns low. The wind knocks gently at the shutters. And for once, you don't close them. You let the night peek in. Let it see that you're still here, that you're not afraid. Or at least, not only afraid, there's space now for something else. for breath, for memory, for tomorrow. The next morning you rise before the bells, not out of anxiety, just because the air feels different, like something is lifting though you can't name what. You step outside barefoot, careful on the stones. There's dew on the stoop and silence, but not the choking kind, not the silence that hides questions and footsteps and accusations. This is morning silence, soft, brief, kind. You breathe it in, let it coat your lungs. Down the street, someone is sweeping already. It's a sound you used to take for granted. Now it sounds like music. You wave. The sweeper looks up, nods, then keeps sweeping. You take that nod and carry it with you all day. At the market, things are still quiet, but less tense. You notice people talking again, not loudly, but words are returning. A child chases a hoop across the square. A woman scolds him gently. You smile. It's not peace, not yet, but it's practice. You buy more than you need. Bread, onions, a lemon, something sweet you haven't tasted in months. You even greet the fishmonger, who flinches at first, then replies, progress. When you return, someone has drawn another eye on your door. But this one is different. It's smaller, more careful, almost respectful. You don't wipe it off. You leave it there. Let it mean whatever someone needs it to. You write again that night. Only this time you write a letter, not to the tribunal, not to the watchers, to yourself. You write, you survived. Not by accident, not by luck, but by remembering. You did not betray your voice. You did not erase yourself. You stayed. You saw, you chose, over and over. You sign it, then burn it. Because the message wasn't for keeping, it was for saying. The fire accepts it with a small crackle, like applause. You eat your sweet thing slowly, letting the sugar melt on your tongue like a secret. Later, you light a second candle, not out of necessity, just because you can. You imagine the city from above, the rooftops like teeth, the alleys like veins, all of it still trembling with memory, but healing, maybe. And then you hear it again, the singing, clearer this time, more voices, the same old hymn. You step outside, not to join in, just to listen, to stand there, wrapped in your shawl, and let the notes pass through you like a blessing. You imagine your old neighbor Leona, somewhere in the dark, humming along. You hope she's safe. You hope she remembers. The next day, someone leaves a loaf of bread at your door, still warm. No note, just bread. You bring it inside, tear off a piece, and eat it with your eyes closed. You remember a story your father once told about a man accused of heresy because he whistled too cheerfully during a funeral procession. Historians still debate if the story is real, but it doesn't matter. You think of that man now, and you smile. You hum softly while you eat. Let the ghosts hear. Let the walls listen. You're not hiding anymore. Days pass. No knocks, no notes, no new names on the tribunal list. The silence no longer feels like a threat. It's become something gentler, something resembling normal, or whatever version of normal can exist after months of staring down your own fear like it was a mirror. You still check the street before you leave home. Old habits. But now it's less about safety and more about curiosity. What has changed? Who's still here? You walk the long way to the market, past the abandoned chapel with the cracked bell, past the courtyard where the mosaic of St. Dominic is missing half his face, past the wall that used to hold wanted posters, heretic proclamations, public penance announcements. That wall is bare now, just weathered stone and fading glue. The pigeons have reclaimed it. You nod as if to say, "Good work." At the market, someone touches your arm. It's the butcher's boy again, older than you remembered, or maybe just thinner. He doesn't speak, he just hands you something, a piece of bark, strange, polished, carved into it a tiny bird, crude but beautiful. You turn it over, confused. He shrugs and runs off. Back home, you place it next to the daisy on the windowsill. Both are dry now, both still standing. You write again, this time a list, not names, not questions, just things you want to remember. The smell of mint on warm potatoes, the hush right before the bells ring, the softness of the old notary's voice when he said, "They want to close your file." The hymn sung off key by 3 different voices. The weight of garlic in your hand. The way Leona knocked. The daisy. The eye drawn with care. The letter you burned. The bread left warm. It's not for anyone else. It's not evidence. It's not defense. It's proof of life. You fold the paper and slide it into the hollow beneath the floorboard. Let it join the mouse-chewed seeds and your other secret. You think about what you would say if they came back. You no longer rehearse confessions. You rehearse questions. You rehearse joy. You rehearse laughter, not as mockery, but as a spell. Something strong enough to confuse fear. You read aloud again that night. You don't even bother to check the windows. You let your voice fill the room. No stage. No scribe. Just your breath on words, older than any tribunal. Historians still argue about how much resistance occurred in the Inquisition years. They chart uprisings and trace letters and map rebellions with impressive detail. But they forget the little things. They forget the songs, the soup, the carved bird passed hand to hand. They forget that surviving itself was a kind of resistance, you remember. You make tea with the last of the herbs. You don't save it for later. Later is not guaranteed. You sip it slowly, letting the warmth loosen everything inside you that's gone tight from months of fear. You write nothing that night. You just sit, breathing, waiting for nothing, just being. That's enough. You wake before sunrise again, not from a nightmare this time, but from the sound of soft rain tapping against the window shutters. It hasn't rained in weeks. The sky has been dry, the air stale with dust and uncertainty. But this morning, the rain is gentle, like someone whispering through a dream. You're just barely leaving. You don't rush to light the candle. Instead, you lie still, and listen. Each drop feels like a little permission, a reminder that the world is still turning, that water still falls, that life continues whether we ask it to or not. You finally rise your steps quieter than usual on the cold floor. The daisy and the carved bird are still there on the windowsill, little witnesses to your private weather. They look oddly alive in the gray-blue morning light. You make tea with the last clove and the tiniest pinch of dried mint, stretching flavor where it barely exists. It's not good, but it's warm, and warm is enough today. By mid-morning, the rain stops, and the city breathes. Not deeply, but it breathes. Streets glisten with puddles, and the dust is momentarily beaten down. For once, your shoes make a soft sound on the stones instead of the usual dry scrape. You like that. You walk with purpose, not with fear, not like prey. You walk like someone who is allowed to occupy space again. At the edge of the market, the tribunal scribe is hanging a new parchment. You don't flinch. You read it. Not a list of accusations this time. Not even a warning. It's a request. The tribunal seeks volunteers to help document tax ledgers and local trade records. Skilled notaries and scribes encouraged to apply. You stare at it. It's absurd, really. After everything, they want help keeping accounts. But there's something strange in your chest. A flicker of heat. Not rage. Not irony. Pride. You were a notary once. Before you were a suspect. Before you became a ghost. You almost laugh. You don't tear the notice down. You don't scoff. You just keep walking, but slower now, as if the air has grown heavier. At home you pull out your old tools, the stylus, the ink pot, the worn leather-bound book with the first 30 pages filled and the rest waiting. They smell like dust and ink and muscle memory. You test a line on a scrap sheet. It's shaky, but it's yours. You begin to write, not official records, not yet. You write your name, just your name, and then beneath it, 3 simple words, still, not, gone. You underline it, not with flourish, with firmness. You slip the page beneath your floorboard, adding to the odd little archive of your survival. That evening, someone knocks. You freeze for only a second. Then, heart steady, you open the door. It's not a tribunal agent. It's not the butcher's boy. It's the old apothecary. Her eyes are cloudy now, and she leans on a cane. But she looks directly at you. You have clean handwriting, she says without preamble. You nod. She hands you a small bag, smells of lavender and dried citrus peel. For ink, she says, not tea. You smile, and for the first time in what feels like forever, it's not just polite. It's reflexive. It bubbles up like spring water, uninvited, but welcome. She doesn't wait for thanks. She turns and hobbles away, vanishing around the corner like she always does, in your memory of her. Back inside, you open the bag carefully. Inside is a tiny vial of dark blue ink, real ink. Not the diluted gray-black you've been stretching for weeks. You hold it up to the light like it's a relic. You write again, this time a full page. Not a list, not a plea, not a confession. A story. Your story. The walk through empty streets, the door with the symbol, the meal with time, the note that said, "Thank you," the boy with the carved bird, the hymns sung at night. You don't censor yourself. You don't dress it up for someone else's approval. You write plainly. This happened. This mattered. This is mine. Historians still debate how many stories from the Inquisition were lost forever, not just grand testimonies and famous names, but the everyday journals, the whispered accounts, the kitchen table retellings. You are not waiting to be found. You are writing before you vanish, and that somehow feels like power. You tuck the page under the Psalter this time. A new place, a new intention, not buried, just held. The rain begins again after midnight. You crack the window, let the breeze in. It smells of soil and change, and when you sleep, you dream for the first time in weeks. It's not a dream of fear or fire or interrogation. You're walking down a street lined with candles, each one floating in its own little bowl of water. You don't know where you're going, but you know you're not alone. Someone hums behind you. The tune is familiar. You hum along. And in the dream, your steps leave prints, but the water erases them gently behind you, as if the path doesn't need proof. Just movement, just presence, just you. You wake before dawn again, but this time it's different. You're not pulled from sleep by nightmares or worry. There's no dread in your belly, no cold sweat soaking the sheets. Instead, you wake with a quiet sense of readiness, as if your bones remember something your mind has yet to grasp. You rise and light the candle, then sit at your desk, the one you haven't used for its true purpose in months. Your tools are already laid out, ink from the apothecary, the cleaned nib, fresh paper. You don't hesitate. You begin transcribing, not records of trade, not letters of defense, but memories, your own. You start with the names, not of enemies, but of those who reached out. Leona with her quiet taps, the boy and his wooden bird, the anonymous bread giver, the apothecary with her unasked for gift. You don't know what to call what you're writing. It's not a journal. It's not a confession. Maybe it's a map, a path made of kindness and chance and memory drawn from the margins of fear. Around mid-morning, there's a soft knock. No rush, no pounding, just a knock. You open the door. It's the notary, the same one from before, the one with the ink-stained fingers and the eyes that look too tired to accuse you of anything. He holds a folded piece of parchment, no seal, just creases. You take it. He nods once and walks away. You don't read it immediately. You finish your line first, then you unfold the page. It's brief. The tribunal has formally concluded your case. No further action will be taken. That's it. No apology. No You sit with the paper in your lap. It's not heavy, but it lands like a stone. There's no joy in the words, but there's relief. And more than that, there's an odd emptiness. Like a chair that's always been occupied suddenly sits vacant. You don't miss what sat there, but you notice the absence. You burn the parchment, not out of rage, out of finality. You don't want to keep the tribunal's language around you any longer. Their voice has no place here now, not in your home, not in your story. You sweep the floor, open the windows, let the fresh air in. You boil lentils and rosemary enough for two, just in case. At noon, someone passes by and slips a folded cloth into your hand. No words. Inside a flat stone, smooth and painted. A tiny dove, your second bird. You place it beside the wooden one. Now they face each other. You take it as a sign, though you're not sure of what. You spend the afternoon mending a shirt you haven't worn in months. It still fits. You hang it near the window and watch the way it catches the wind. It looks like someone might wear it again, maybe even you. That evening, you walk through the city not aimlessly but without a destination. You pass others doing the same. Heads higher, eyes less guarded. People nod at each other. Again, some even smile. You end up near the river. There's a group gathered. No shouting, no sermon, just standing. Someone hums. Another joins in. It's not a hymn this time. It's an old folk song, the kind sung during harvest festivals. Simple, joyful, the kind that was forbidden just a few months ago. You stand at the edge of the circle. You don't sing, but your lips move with the words silently. You remember every note. Historians still argue whether these songs ever truly disappeared during the Inquisition years, or if they simply went underground, whispered in kitchens, hummed while washing clothes, sung to children who didn't yet know the cost of sound. You believe they never vanished, just like you didn't. You head home under a moon that's almost full. The city smells of baked bread and river water. You don't lock your door when you get inside. You light your candle and open your psalter, not for prayer, but for rhythm. Reading it out loud feels like keeping beat with the world again. Afterward, you sit by the window. The dove and the wooden bird catch the moonlight. You write one last note for the night. I am not who I was before, but I am still. You smile, and for the first time in ages, you sleep through the night. The next morning greets you with birdsong, real birdsong, not imagined, not distant, not faintly mistaken for a whisper in your dreams. They are right outside your window. Sparrows, maybe, or finches. You don't know for sure. You never really paid attention before, but now you do. You sit up slowly, savoring the softness of the air, the way light moves gently through the shutters like it has all the time in the world. You open the window fully. The world beyond is not healed, but it's breathing again. You dress with intention, that mended shirt, the better shoes. You even braid your hair, not for anyone else, just for you. The act itself feels ceremonial, a gentle declaration, I am still here. As you step into the street, you notice small things others might miss. Chalk drawings by children along the stones, stars and suns, and a very bad drawing of what's clearly meant to be a cat. Someone has placed tiny potted herbs on a windowsill that's long been bare. You pass a baker setting up an outdoor table with honey buns and almond loaves. You walk toward the heart of the city, toward the archives. The building looks the same, weathered and grand, full of quiet corners and forgotten shelves. You haven't entered it in over a year, but today you step through the door. The same notary sits at the desk, the one with tired eyes and fingers that always seem stained with ink. He doesn't look up at first, then he does, and something in his face softens. Help catalog the ledgers, he asks. You nod. He gestures to a side room. You'll find the March volumes there. We're starting with salt and soap taxes. Not glamorous, but you smile before he can finish. Glamour is not what you came for. You enter the room and take a seat by the open window. Dust floats in golden beams. The ledgers are stiff and full of scribbles and poor handwriting, but none of that matters. You begin copying. Your hand steadies by the second line. It's like remembering a language you once forgot you could speak. As you write, you listen. There's the shuffle of feet, the clink of ink bottles, the soft coughing of someone in the corner. It's not silence, but it's not chaos either. It's work. Honest, ordinary, almost boring work. And in that boredom, you find comfort. Historians often skip over the paperwork of the Inquisition. They focus on the trials, the sentences, the burned records, and screaming crowds. But behind all that fury, there were pages and pages of numbers, of taxes, of inventories, of salt shipments and laundry soap, and how many candles the town chapel needed per month. The mundane held it all together. And now, here you are, doing what was once forbidden to you, with steady ink and full breath. You take a break at noon, step outside into the courtyard, where the sun hits just right. A young girl plays with a hoop, there her laughter high and thin, like a flute. You sit on the edge of a stone basin, sip water from a tin cup, and feel something loosen in your chest. That night back home, you do not write. You just sit, hands folded in your lap, eyes half closed. The little bird carvings are still on your windowsill, but tonight they are joined by a third item, a tiny pouch of dried lavender. You didn't place it there. You smile and leave it untouched. You don't need to know who left it. You just let it be. You light a candle not for reading, but for quiet. The flame dances low and lazy. You breathe with it, slow and even. Inhale, hold, exhale. Let the rhythm remind you that you're still in your body, that your voice is still yours, that your story did not end with an accusation. You hum, Not a hymn, not a song, just a few notes that have lived in your throat for too long without being let out. The sound startles you at first. It's raw, honest, but then it becomes familiar. You sing again, and this time you don't stop. You sing until your voice becomes air, until the candle gutters, until the walls lean in to listen. The day begins without urgency. You wake to soft sun and the smell of bread from 2 doors down. No alarms, no knocks, no hidden eyes, watching from behind curtains. Just morning, just breath, just you. There's something different in the way your body moves now, less guarded, more deliberate. You stretch and dress slowly, enjoying the ritual instead of rushing through it like armor. The air smells of cinnamon and ash. The streets sound like people again, not ghosts. You're no longer afraid to open your door, not just literally, but in every way. You carry a folder under your arm now, not secret documents, not desperate notes, pages of your own writing, stories, lists, fragments, names, observations, memories, little things you once promised yourself you'd forget just to survive, but didn't. You walk toward the chapel. It's been closed for months, its bells silent, its doors barred. Today they're cracked open. Inside, it's mostly empty. Dust and disrepair linger, but the air is thick with something else. Something that feels like return, like cautious hope, like a place where things might start again. You place your folder at the altar. No prayers, no ceremony, just a gesture. You leave it there for anyone who might want to know, not just about the tribunal, but about what lived in the spaces between their sentences. You leave it for the ones who come after, the ones who will need to remember not just the pain, but the quiet acts of resistance, the folded bread, the carved birds, the notes tucked into sleeves, the knock of 3 soft taps. Outside, the city continues. You see faces you don't recognize, and a few you do. The baker, the notary, a child dragging a wooden toy across the stones. You pass the wall where once hung lists of heretics. Now there's chalk. Someone's drawn a sun. Another, a row of flowers. You take a piece of chalk and add your own. A bird. Wings out. No cage. No fire. Just movement. You spend the rest of the day helping sort pages at the archive. You drink tea with the tired notary who tells you he once wanted to be a poet. You believe him. His handwriting curves like it's trying to sing. At dusk, you stop by the apothecary. She gives you a bundle of dried rosemary. For keeping your thoughts clear, she says. You nod and tuck it into your sleeve. Back home, you boil water and slice 2 apples. You hum while you do it. You realize that for the first time in months, you're making food without looking over your shoulder. You light a single candle as night falls. Then another, then another. You place them around the room, not for protection, but for warmth. And then, just because you sit by the window and write one last page, not for the tribunal, not for any record, just for yourself. I survived, but I did more than that. I noticed. I listened. I remembered. I sang. I stayed soft. I loved without saying it aloud. I am not untouched, but I am not ruined. You fold the page, slide it between the pages of your psalter, a quiet archive, a final footnote. And when you lie down that night, the city exhales around you. No bells, no fear, just the soft chorus of a world beginning again. You close your eyes, you sleep, not like before, not in snatches or fragments or flights. You sleep fully, without armor, without dread. You sleep like someone who knows the sun will rise, and that when it does, you'll be there to see it. Let your breath slow now. There's nothing left to hide from, no secrets to guard, no names to remember or forget. Just the stillness of a quiet room and the gentle rhythm of your breath against the world's. Imagine yourself walking those same streets, stone beneath your feet, rosemary in your pocket, a folded letter tucked close to your chest. The sun is soft, not scorching. The air carries the scent of bread and old paper. There's a bird overhead circling without worry. And you are just here. Nothing to prove, nothing chasing you. You pass the old chapel. It's no longer silent. You hear laughter inside. You don't go in. You just smile and walk on. Your shadow stretches beside you long and steady. And somewhere in the distance, someone hums a tune you once knew. You hum along without fear of being heard. Let the day fade now. Let the room you're in soften at the edges. The story is over, but your breath continues, and in that quiet, you are safe. You are whole. You are here. Let your muscles unclench. Let your mind drift. Let sleep take your hand like an old friend. And when you wake, remember this. You lived. You were kind. And you were never truly alone.